All right, guys, welcome to class. We're going to finish up chapter 16 on digestive system. We ended on Monday talking about the liver, and now we'll go through the pancreas, and we're going through some of your accessory digestive organs. So your digestive system tract is one long continuous tube, going from the oral cavity, esophagus, stomach, intestines, anal canal, anus. That's one long continuous tube. But then we have these accessory organs which secrete digestive juices, bile, enzymes to help with digestion, which is the breakdown of all the foodstuffs we eat. We talked about the liver, and now we're going to get into the pancreas, which is located right behind your stomach in the inferior part of your left upper quadrant. It's an organ that's always a little tricky to find. If you ever dissect a cadaver or an animal, for example, a cat, the pancreas is always a little bit tricky to find because it's kind of embedded within, the posterior wall of the stomach. The tail extends to the left to touch the spleen, and the head is near the midline of the body. We have endocrine tissues of the pancreas that have pancreatic islets, and those will have cells that produce our famous insulin and glucagon, which control blood sugar levels. And then the exocrine tissues of the pancreas, those are what will produce your digestive enzymes that travel through ducts and are emptied into your small intestine to help with digestion, specifically in the duodenum. These are the three main protein digesting enzymes. So these enzymes will specifically from pancreas to digest proteins, and it'll break down proteins into amino acids, so that amino acids can be more easily absorbed into the blood circulation. So we have trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. Pancreatic amylase continues the polysaccharide digestion that began in the oral cavity. So this amylase enzyme, this is what is secreted in your saliva in the oral cavity. And we have more amylase secreted from the pancreas. And amylase always digests carbohydrates or long chains of sugars, which is a polysaccharide, many sugars. The pancreatic enzyme lipase is also secreted, and that digests lipids or fats. And then the pancreatic enzyme nuclease digests nuclear components like DNA and RNA into their individual component nucleotides. So those are just different secretions that are coming out of the pancreas. This is a look at how the pancreas kind of fits next to the duodenum, which is your small intestine. Again, the duodenum is the first part of your small intestine shown here. And the duodenum is the smallest part. It's shaped like a C, about 25 centimeters long. And you can see here how we have a main pancreatic duct, which will bring all of these digestive juices into the duodenum at this duodenal papilla, which is like an opening into your small intestine. This common bile duct is coming from the gallbladder and liver to bring bile into your duodenum, and bile helps to digest fats. So those are the exocrine functions. This little guy is an accessory pancreatic duct, which will just bring more digestive enzymes into the duodenum. And then below here, we see the different tissues forming endocrine and exocrine functions. So this itself is a pancreatic islet. And we have different cells, alpha, beta, delta cells, as we remember from your endocrine system, that produce insulin and glucagon. So that's the pancreatic islet. You can see here that it says to the bloodstream, because hormones, glucagon and insulin, travel through your bloodstream. These are the pancreatic acinar or acini cells, and those will secrete the enzymes that are traveling through ducts, specifically this pancreatic duct, to be entered into your small intestine, your duodenum, to help with digestion. So how do we control the secretions that come from our pancreas? It's under nervous system control, specifically the parasympathetic stimulation, because that's our rest and digest division. Under control from your vagus nerve, which causes your pancreas to release a secretion rich in digestive enzymes. We have secretin that is released from your duodenum. that tells the pancreas that we need more digestive enzymes. Cholecystokinin, which are the pink arrows, is also released from the duodenum, and that causes the pancreas to release the secretion-rich and digestive enzymes. The secretin allows for a little bit of a secretion of bicarbonate ions, and those allow to kind of counteract the acidity of the juices that are coming from the stomach. So secretin and cholecystokinin are both released from the duodenum, most likely, when food is about to enter the duodenum or food is there. They travel through the bloodstream and then tell the pancreas, hey, we need some digestive enzymes because there's food in the duodenum that needs help digesting. So then we go to the large intestine, which is a part of your GI tract. The main function of the large intestine is to absorb water from indigestible food. So at this point, a lot of the nutrients have been absorbed from the food that you've eaten. And that mainly occurs in the small intestine, the absorption of nutrients into the bloodstream. The function of your large intestine is then to kind of compact the feces or the waste that does still exist from anything that cannot be digested or cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream. So the large intestine absorbs excess water to compact these feces and waste together. We have the cecum, the colon, the rectum, and the anal canal as part of your large intestine. The cecum is the first part. It's kind of a pouch at the bottom of your ascending colon, and it will join with the small intestine at the ileocecal junction, which is the junction between your ileum, the third part of your small intestine, and then the cecum, the first part of your large intestine. The cecum has the appendix attached to it, which is about 9 centimeters in length. It's often removed because of the bacteria that it contains. If there's ever an infection in your appendix, it can become inflamed and possibly burst. And if an appendix bursts, that's a life-threatening situation because all of the bacteria and junk that was inside of the appendix to cause it to burst and inflame, it's basically just poison and toxin inside. So if your appendix were to burst, that poison and toxins can spread to all parts of your abdominal cavity, leading to a life-threatening situation. So if you ever have, a kid or a grown-up who has pain in their, appendix or umbilical region, get them checked out immediately because that can be a potentially terrible situation. The colon then is our large intestine. And again, it's named large for the diameter. Small intestine is named for the small diameter. Large intestine has a large diameter, where your small intestine was about 20 meters long, if you remember that. The large intestine is only about 1.5 meters long. It contains an ascending portion, a transverse portion, and descending colon, and then sigmoid colon regions. And colon cancer is just cancer of one of these regions of the large intestine. A colonoscopy is when they take a kind of video look inside your colon, your large intestine, for any, they're looking for polyps, which are kind of extra tissue flaps that are within the colon, or any sort of extra or abnormal things they're seeing in your colon. And colonoscopies are very important to start getting when you're in your 40s, most at 50, because it can be a huge preventative measure against colon cancer. A little bit uncomfortable because they're taking a camera through your large intestine and there's only one way to get in there, but you're usually put under for that. So please get colonoscopies, colon screenings, because it can be a huge preventative measure against colon cancer. And then the rectum is the straight tube. It begins at the sigmoid colon and ends at the anal canal. And I'll show you a picture of that in 2 more slides. The anal canal is just the last 2 to 3 centimeters of the digestive tract. From the time that you eat something, it takes about 18 to 24 hours to pass through the entire digestive tract. So keep that in mind, in terms of regular bowel movements. You should be having one every 18 to 24 hours because that's how long food takes to pass through. The feces that will pass, it's a product of water, indigestible food, and other microbes. So there's a healthy bacteria that lives in your large intestine. The microbes will help synthesize vitamin K. So here we have the large intestine, the appendix sticking out of the bottom of your cecum, connected to your ileum. Here's the ascending colon, the right colic flexure when it turns on the right side of the body, the transverse colon, the left colic flexure when it curves down the left side of your abdominal cavity, the descending colon, and then the sigmoid colon is this little curved shaped region. And then we have the rectum and the anal canal, surrounded with internal and external anal sphincters, which allow you to control the passage of feces out of the body. This is a really cool picture looking at the large intestine inside of the body. Pictures like this are really helpful to identify to make sure your colon is where it's supposed to be. Not often, in less than 10% of people, the large intestine is actually switched. So the ascending colon goes up the left side of the body and the descending colon goes down the right side of the body. So not very common. And most often that leads to zero health problems. It's just a little switched, it's rearranged. Except if there is an appendectomy and the large intestine is switched, you just got to make sure they might feel pain from the other side of their abdominal cavity. The tennae coli is just a kind of a line of smooth muscle that controls kind of the movements, the segmentation, and movements, the mixing of the feces as they pass through the large intestine. So the digestive process, simply broken down, we have digestion, which is the breakdown of food. So this kind of the mechanical breakdown of food that takes in an apple and literally breaks it down to the teeniest, tiniest components of an apple: glucose, the monosaccharides, the simple sugars. Propulsion is moving food through the digestive tract, including swallowing and peristalsis. Absorption occurs primarily in the small intestine, specifically the duodenum and the jejunum, and that's the absorption of nutrients into the bloodstream. And then defecation is the medically correct terminology for the elimination of waste in the forms of feces. So here we have digestion, digesting food, breaking it down into kind of the simplest components we can: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Carbohydrates gets broken down into simple sugars or monosaccharides. Lipids get broken down into their fatty acid and monoglyceride components, and proteins get broken down to their smallest amino acid components. And this is just a great kind of chart showing where the majority of the breakdown processes occur throughout the digestive tract. Carbohydrates start to get broken down in the mouth. Lipids, well, everything starts to get mechanically broken down in the mouth by the teeth. But then you can see here kind of where digestion occurs. Where do carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins get broken down into their simplest components? And then what enzymes help with that? Salivary amylase helps break down proteins, or carbohydrates, excuse me. Pepsin helps to break down proteins. We have pancreatic amylase breaking down more carbohydrates. We have bile and lipase breaking down lipids. Trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase breaking down more proteins from the pancreas. So we have just kind of shown throughout the digestive tract where this digestion is occurring. So kind of a neat chart there. And then we'll kind of end this chapter a little bit more talking about how carbs, lipids, and proteins are broken down specifically by their enzymes, which help do that. So a polysaccharide is a carbohydrate. It just means it's a chain of sugars put together. It's split into a disaccharide by salivary and pancreatic amylase. And then disaccharides are broken down into their monosaccharides, their simplest sugar component, one sugar, by disaccharidases. If anything ever ends in the word ace, it's an enzyme which occurs on the surface of your intestinal epithelium. Glucose is absorbed by what we call co-transport with sodium into the intestinal epithelium. And glucose is carried by your hepatic portal vein to the liver and enters most cells by facilitated diffusion. All of your cells need glucose to create ATP. So glucose will either go directly to your cells to start that process of creating energy, ATP, or it'll be stored in the liver for future use. So here we have co-transport of glucose. So we're in our intestines. Glucose is the simplest form of a carbohydrate. It will be co-transported, meaning that it's transported at the same time as sodium through your intestinal epithelial cells into your capillaries. And then glucose will travel through the bloodstream to the liver, where it's stored, or to your body cells that need glucose to create energy, or ATP. Lipids are broken down by lipase, the enzyme that breaks down lipids. It breaks them down into their monoglyceride components and fatty acid components. Bile salts will surround fatty acids and monoglycerides to form a missile, different from like a missile, weapon, but a missile attaches to the plasma membrane of your intestinal epithelial cells, and the fatty acids and monoglycerides will just pass by simple diffusion into your intestinal epithelial cells. Within that intestinal cell, fatty acids and monoglycerides are converted to triglycerides. Proteins will surround the triglycerides to form what we call a chylomicron. And that will move out of your intestinal epithelial cells by exocytosis. And it's these chylomicrons that enter lacteals, and they are within the intestinal villi, or little extensions of your intestinal wall. And these chylomicrons will carry those triglycerides to the lymphatic system and then to the blood. So specifically, when we're talking about lipids and how lipids get from the inside of your intestines to the bloodstream, they're surrounded by bile salts. That's where bile comes in handy from your liver. Bile will surround the fatty acid, and that allows it to get into these intestinal cells. Triglycerides will then be formed, covered with a protein coat, and that's called a chylomicron. And then chylomicrons are picked up by lacteals, which take basically these fats, these lipids, through the lymphatic system for processing before they'll eventually enter your bloodstream as well. Lipoproteins then, lipids are packaged into lipoproteins to allow them to be transported in the lymph and the blood. They're molecules that are part water soluble and part lipid soluble. And since lymph and blood contain water and lipids are not water soluble, the lipoprotein is the necessary structure needed for them to be transported throughout your lymph and blood. Lipoproteins include chylomicrons, low density lipoproteins, and high density lipoproteins, which is the good and bad forms of cholesterol. So here we have the chylomicron, what it looks like. It's filled up with triglycerides, phospholipids, cholesterol. You have a low density lipoprotein and a high density lipoprotein. The low density lipoprotein has about 45% cholesterol, and the high density lipoprotein has about 20% cholesterol. So that is a look at lipoproteins. Pepsin then digests our proteins. It's secreted by the stomach. The pancreas secretes trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase, which all help to digest proteins. And in the small intestines, these enzymes are all activated to all digest our proteins. In the small intestines, other enzymes termed peptidases might be bound to the microvilli to further break down smaller peptides into tripeptides. And then we can absorb tripeptides, dipeptides, or individual amino acids through your intestinal epithelial wall through co-transport mechanisms. So here we have a variety of enzymes breaking down proteins into amino acids. And amino acids are also transported into these intestinal epithelial cells via co-transport, so at the same time as something else. And then these amino acids can be directly absorbed into the bloodstream, usually taken to the liver. Again, the hepatic portal system, anything absorbed into the bloodstream from your intestines is taken to the liver for processing so that your liver can detox anything that you've taken in and then store it or use it for future use. A couple slides left. We'll end with water and minerals. Water is nice that it can move across your intestinal wall in either direction, and the movement always depends on osmotic pressures that are established. About 99% of water entering your intestine will be absorbed into the body. So water is super important in digestion. This is why you need to be drinking water all the time, because your body needs water for everything, and most of the water that you drink will be absorbed into the body because it needs it. Minerals are also actively transported across the wall of the small intestine. And this shows us, this is a really interesting chart, and our final chart of the day for chapter 16, showing how the amount of fluid that you ingest, let's say it's 2 liters a day, the amount of fluid that's added from saliva, from gastric secretions, pancreatic secretions, bile, small intestine secretions, about 92% of that fluid is absorbed back into that body. In the small intestine, another 6 to 7% is absorbed back in the body of the large intestine. So all this fluid that's going on, from ingesting fluid and then the secretions from the body itself, about 99% of it is absorbed back into the body, and about 1% of it is lost in feces. So that's just kind of an interesting look at the fluids. So this ends our chapter 16 digestive system, and we're going to jump right in and just start chapter 17, which is a little bit on nutrition, because it's kind of a lengthy chapter, and I just want to get started on it so that we can finish it on Monday, because your next lecture exam will be a week from today on these chapters. All right, so this is chapter 17, a very interesting chapter on nutrition, metabolism, and body temperature regulation. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about nutrition. And again, we won't get through too much of this. We're just going to start it. Nutrition is the process by which food is taken into and then used by the body. So it includes digestion and absorption, which we talked about, but it also includes metabolism, which is the idea of using the good things that you put in your body for use. The study of nutrition involves the study of food and drink requirements for normal body function, and nutrients specifically are chemicals that are taken into the body that provide energy and building blocks for new molecules. This is a little bit dated, not really, but we always talked about the pyramid scheme for nutrients and making sure you're getting the various foods based on the pyramid or the food pyramid. But now the US Department of Health and Human Services, in June of 2011, created this MyPlate idea. So the USDA introduced MyPlate, which is a new food icon to replace the former food icon called MyPyramid. It's just a simple visual reminder of how to build a healthy meal. The MyPlate shows a plate and glass with portions representing fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy food. And to emphasize the importance of making healthy food choices, half the plate is fruit and vegetables. And that should always be, your meal should always be half fruit and vegetables. And I know we don't do that. I don't do that, especially with kids. In addition to the MyPlate icon, the USDA has launched the ChooseMyPlate.gov website that includes information on how to make more healthy dietary choices that you can look at. So you can look up at that website on your own, but this is just a look at MyPlate. How half your plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter should be protein, a quarter grains, and then have a little bit of dairy in there. So just a visual, simple representation. It's a little bit simpler than maybe the pyramid scheme, the food pyramid of what you should be eating. Calories, we all know what calories are. A calorie is the amount of energy required to raise a temperature of 1 gram of water, 1 degree Celsius. And a kilocalorie is 1,000 calories. So kilo means 1,000, and that's what a kilocalorie is, 1,000 calories. So this is just the energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. So your body needs energy. Your body needs calories to do work, and it's good to eat healthy calories. The nutrients can be divided into these 6 major classes: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. And we'll go over what some of those nutrients are. A balanced diet consists of enough nutrients in correct proportion to support normal body functions. You need a balanced diet, you need nutrients, you need food to perform the functions of your body. And if you don't have food, you'll get really hungry and your body will break down. Essential nutrients are nutrients that must be ingested because the body cannot manufacture them, or it cannot manufacture them in adequate amounts. The essential nutrients include certain amino acids, fatty acids, most vitamins, minerals, water, and some carbohydrates. So essential nutrients are things that you must eat because your body can't make them. So carbohydrates, we'll go through kind of these essential nutrients. They contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms in a hydrogen to oxygen 2-to-1 ratio. And an example, the most famous example we have is glucose, which has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. Carbohydrates include your simple sugars. Those are monosaccharides like glucose and fructose. Carbohydrates include disaccharides, which are 2 sugars put together. And then polysaccharides are chains of many sugars put together. Polysaccharides are starches, grains, vegetables, and glycogen. And when we put 2 sugars together in a disaccharide, we just change the name slightly. So if we put a glucose and a fructose together, we get a sucrose disaccharide, and a glucose and a galactose together, we get the lactose disaccharide, which you might have heard of before. A simple carbohydrate has no nutritional value and it can cause weight gain. And an example of a simple carbohydrate, it can be found in candy and soft drinks, or soda pop, which can include 1 can of soda, can include 9 teaspoons of sugar, which is crazy. So you're recommended, rightly so, to take those sparingly. But a complex type of carbohydrate, these are fibers that help to decrease colon cancer and heart disease. So an example of complex carbohydrates are whole grains, pastas, rice, and bread. And you're recommended to take these at every meal. 1 serving is a piece of bread or half a cup of uncooked pasta. Why do we need carbohydrates? They are for short-term energy storage. They can be converted to glucose very quickly, and we need that glucose to make ATP, or energy, that our body needs. Brain cells require glucose, and so that's why we need this glucose readily available at all times. Lipids then are totally or partially insoluble in water. Lipids include triglycerides, steroids, phospholipids, and fat-soluble vitamins. Triglycerides are the most common type of lipid in the diet, accounting for about 95% of all the lipids you take. And if the fat is a liquid at room temperature, it's referred to as an oil. So olive oil, vegetable oil, that's just because it's a fat, but at room temperature, it is converted into a liquid. Fats can be saturated or unsaturated, good and bad. They're saturated if their fatty acids only have single covalent bonds between them. And the fats are unsaturated if they have double bonds between the carbon atoms. A monounsaturated fat has 1 double bond, and if you have a polyunsaturated fat, it has 2 or more bonds. We'll talk about why those can be good and bad in a little bit. Saturated fats are found in meat, dairy products, eggs, nuts, coconut oil, and palm oil. And monounsaturated fats include olive oil and peanut oil. Question, Ruthie? Yeah. I'll pause there and take a sip of water. Feel free to type or just speak to We'll talk about vitamins in a little bit. Yeah, we'll get to vitamins. Good question. And then a polyunsaturated fats are found in fish, safflower, sunflower, and corn oils. So in general, what we have here is we have saturated versus unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats are better for us because they're liquid at room temperature. And saturated fats are bad for us because they're solid at room temperature. And really simply, a saturated fat means that at their chemical makeup, they're just very saturated and the carbon bonds are just harder to break. So that makes them a solid and it's harder for our body to digest. And unsaturated fat, liquid at room temperature, is better for us because it's easy for our body to digest because the bonds that make up that molecule are not parallelly stacked. Trans fats are even worse. These are fats that are processed, fats and oils. They raise low density lipoproteins and lower high density lipoproteins and LDLs, the bad cholesterol. They are associated with increased risks of heart disease. Cholesterol is specifically what we call a steroid molecule, and the cholesterol is highly concentrated in the brain, the liver, egg yolks, whole milk, cheese, butter, and meats. Low density lipoprotein is known as the bad cholesterol because it carries cholesterol from your liver and it takes it directly to your cells. And high density lipoprotein is considered the good cholesterol because it carries cholesterol from your cells and stores it in the liver. And it can be processed, and you can increase the high density lipoproteins through exercise. So it's just incredible to me how really simple things like diet and exercise will just increase your lifespan tremendously. What you put in your body, think of it, I've even heard that sugar is referred to as poison. A little bit of sugar is fine, but too much sugar, too much high fatty foods, trans fats, processed fats, what you put into your body will just put extra strain on your body and all parts of the body to try to get rid of it. So recommended for lipids are sparingly cholesterol, limit to about 300 milligrams per day, which is equivalent to about 1 egg yolk. Lipids can cause weight gain, heart disease, and increase your risk of colon and pancreatic cancer. In order to reduce fat and cholesterol, and this, I did not make this PowerPoint, so I'm not trying to go on a soapbox and tell you what to eat. So these PowerPoints are from your book in the chapter 17 nutrition chapter. But for ideas to reduce fat and cholesterol, eat more chicken, fish, beans, poultry, turkey, eat vegetables and fruits that are high in fiber, use herbs and spices for seasonings instead of a lot of salt. Remove the skin, so take off that delicious fried chicken skin that we all love. Broil, bake, and grill things instead of frying in high fatty oils. Limit creams and butter and avoid processed cheese, egg yolks, and liver. The egg yolks is there's a debate going on if you should just eat egg whites or if you can eat egg yolks every once in a while. As usual, the medical community kind of changes as we learn more as to how these work in our bodies. In general, I think moderation is key in anything, and too much of anything can be bad. The functions of lipids then, they're more for long-term energy storage, and they also insulate your body against heat loss. So we all have a layer of lipids in our body underneath our dermis layer of our skin. Lipids also help to protect our organs, so they're very helpful for protection. And cholesterol is a huge part of the cell membrane structure, which is a type of lipid. Proteins are chains of amino acids. They're found in most of the plant and animal products eaten. And proteins are constructed of 20 different types of amino acids, which are divided into 2 groups: essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. And again, anything that's essential means that we need to digest it and obtain it from our diet. So here are the 9 essential amino acids that we must obtain in our diet because our body cannot synthesize them. So those are listed there for you. So if we say that a protein is complete, it contains all of those 9 essential acids that our body needs, but we need to get from a food source, whereas an incomplete protein does not contain all 9. Animal proteins tend to be complete proteins, whereas a plant protein tends to be incomplete. But some plant-based foods such as soy and quinoa, that's how you say this word, quinoa, took me years to figure that out, are sources of complete protein. So no, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you don't eat meat, that's fine, but just make sure that you're getting these complete protein plant-based foods like soy and quinoa, because many plant-based proteins are incomplete proteins, and you want to make sure that your body is getting all 9 essential amino acids in a complete protein, such as soy or quinoa. Amino acids are not stored, so a daily supply is actually required. So you need protein in your diet daily. The recommended amount is 1 to 2 servings of dairy, 1 to 3 servings of nuts or beans, or 0 to 2 servings of fish, poultry, and eggs. Red meat, they say to use sparingly because while it is a complete protein, it usually contains a lot of other kind of fat, cholesterol in it. So they say to eat red meat very sparingly. The functions of proteins then, it's used to make skin, hair, nails, and muscles. Proteins are the source of creating hemoglobin, which transports oxygen through the blood. Proteins act as enzymes. They have functions in your immune system. Proteins make up actin and myosin for muscle contraction, and they are part of your cell membrane. So you need proteins daily. Just get it from these sources: dairy, nuts, beans, fish, poultry, or eggs. And don't just start eating, steaks 3 times a day. And then I think we'll stop there with vitamins. So we're going to end a little early today, but this will give us Monday's lecture to get through vitamins. So Ruth, I'll have to answer your question on Monday, but we'll end here with vitamins. We'll finish up with vitamins on Monday. And then your next lecture exam will be a week from today on Wednesday. That's your 3rd lecture exam, I believe, because the semester is quickly winding down. So your final lecture exam then will be, I think, May 16th or 18th when the semester ends. So I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And if anyone has any questions, you're free to hang out here. Otherwise, I will see you guys